Why do you think architect nibs are so much less common than stubs? I love the way they write, but I can't think of a single company that offers stock architect grinds. However, basically everyone offers at least one size stub. I think there's a couple of different reasons for that. I don't know this for certain because I haven't really gotten good information out from most companies that do architects. Or from any company that does architects, really. I think the architect grind is something relatively nouveau. It's not, I don't know the grind itself is that new, but I think the popularity of that grind is relatively new. I don't remember a lot of people talking about architects when I first got into the pen hobby, 8-9 years ago. But I feel like it's really picked up speed in the last probably 3 or 4 years. It's really become much more popular, especially I think for people that are using pens for print. I think the rise of Instagram, I don't know this 100% for a fact, but I honestly think that the rise of Instagram has helped the popularity of the architect grind. Just people writing with it and stuff like that, doing more hand lettering, that's become a lot more popular, and I think that has contributed to the demand for such a grind. So let me explain to you what an architect is versus a stub. I've explained this in some videos before, but I actually have the pens inked up where I can show you. So a stub nib is pretty familiar. It's a pen where it's ground. So you have a normal nib where it's ground like a ball, like this. A stub nib is ground kind of flat and long, like this. So then on the cross stroke, it's going to be a thin line because it's a much thinner stroke. And on the down stroke, it's much wider, so you're going to end up with a wide kind of swath. So if you, I'll go ahead and just kind of write out for you stub. And so on the cross stroke, if I'd thought about this, I would have maybe written this out ahead of time. But I did not. So now you get to sit here and watch me write. And then downstroke. Okay. So kind of showing you what the writing is here. So the cross stroke is much thinner and your downstroke is much thicker. So you can see here, so when you do writing, it's kind of like fake calligraphy, which I love because you don't have to write any differently than you do with a regular nib, but it allows your handwriting to look fancier. So it's pretty cool. So an architect nib, also known as a Hebrew nib or an Arabic nib, it really is not that different. It's just the opposite direction. So it's ground in such a way where it looks almost more like a blade, and it allows you to have a thick cross stroke and a thin downstroke. And I'm going to write with that now so that I can show you what is going on. All right, so let's see here. Architect. And this is a little more finicky. And I have to spell architect, which is harder. Cross stroke. The thing I will say about the architect nib is that you have to be more specific about the angle up and down that you hold it than you do with a stub. And I really can't multitask. So what you end up doing is having writing like this. So stub has a cross stroke that is thin across and thick down, and an architect has a cross stroke that is thick across and thin down. Honestly, when I'm writing with the two of them, I still get line variation and stuff like that. I don't notice as much of a difference between the two. Yes, there's a subtle difference. I don't notice as much of a difference between the two when I'm writing in cursive, but the print is where it can look really different. So I will try writing in print, or especially block. So I'll write stub, nib, with the stub, and architect. Forgive me, all my audio listeners who are not seeing everything that I'm doing here. There you go, showing you in the video So stub nib, writing it in block print versus an architect. So it can look a little different. The architect, I think, has a lot more character when you're doing it on in a block print. So now you get to see the difference there. The reason why I think that people aren't offering the architect is because the architect is more difficult to make. It's more steps to grind. I got to kind of test both of these and learn more about them while I was visiting with Brian Gray, which was pretty handy because it gave me a more in-depth knowledge of these nibs than I had before. And the stub is much more forgiving. So as in terms of a writing experience, it's a little easier to write with a stub, which I think most pen companies who are making these pens and selling them all over the world, they always have to balance out, you know, how user-friendly some of these things are, because if it's not as user-friendly, it's going to end up coming back to them a lot as warranty repairs, because people are just not as familiar with them. They're more specialized grinds, things like the architect. You have to kind of know what it is that you're getting into, and I just don't think most people know what they're getting into with an architect. I think it's a really cool nib. I think it's a lot of fun. But do I think it's for everybody? Definitely not. It's very much of a specialty grind. I think it's cool and it's very fun. Me personally, it's not a nib that I enjoy writing with on like a long-term basis, because basically the way the architect grind is, actually I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try to do this. Okay, I'm going to try to zoom in and show you the difference between the two. So here's the stub nib. This is an Edison Nouveau Premier past limited edition seasonal, sorry, not limited edition, but seasonal that we did back in 2014. It's called the Autumn Harvest, and this is our current one, Nightfall. So the one on is this left? Yeah, your left. This is a stub nib, so you can see how it's, I'm going to try and zoom in as much as humanly possible. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's pretty good. So you can see here how it's ground. So it's cross stroke is thin, downstroke is fat. And here is the architect. So architect is similar, but it's a blade. It's more compound cuts, much more handwork involved in getting this to write, especially to get it to write well. You can see kind of the difference between these two. Let me really try and get them so you can see what's going on there. Can you see the difference? Yeah. So it's a more compound cut. It's more complicated. You have to hold it when you're writing with it because of the way that it's cut. You can see here when I have it from the side that it has to be held at a very specific angle. So if your angle up and down with the architect is off at all, it's going to write scratchy and it's not going to flow properly. Whereas a stub is much more forgiving. It's a little less forgiving side to side, but then the architect, because it's a compound cut, is not super forgiving side to side either. So you have to write with the architect in a very, very specific, very unforgiving way, and it can look really cool, but it's not something that anybody who, you know, basically fountain pens are complicated enough for people that have never used them before, and then when you get into having to hold it at a very, very specific angle, it can just be kind of complicated. So I think that's the reason why. If no other, that's the reason why most pen makers are not offering them stock. And you see these available from custom Nibmeisters. Pretty much most of the Nibmeisters, the architect is a fairly standard cut. I know Mark Bacchus, that's kind of his like specialty grind. If you consider it, each Nibmeister might have their specialty. I think like Mike Masuyama is really known for extra fines, and then Mark is kind of known more for his architects. So, but it's something interesting to check out if you happen to be interested in that. And now you have at least a little more context as to what it is.